Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Voices of Recovery. I'm your host, Michele Eich, and this is my book, How to Kill an Addiction, Recovery with God. In this book, I have how to overcome life-controlling issues God's way, and we pretty much all have them, as well as 20 powerful testimonies of real people who have overcome with God's help. So I'd love it if you check it out. But every week, I interview someone who has either overcome a life-controlling issue or is in the fight to help others overcome. And this week, my guest is Christy. Christy, welcome to Voices of Recovery.
Thank you so much, Michele. I'm delighted to be here with you guys.
Yes, it's great to have you. And Christy, if you could just take a moment to introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Sure. Yes, I'm Christy Pierce. I am a mom of three. Really, they're almost college students now. I say teenagers. We've been in the trenches. My son Benji's 18. My daughter Corey's 21. She's at UC Berkeley. And then my other daughter Annie is 19. She's down at San Diego State. So at least they're all close by. We have a very close family.
Nice.
And married to this amazing guy, Ben Pierce. We both are pastors. We met at Fuller Seminary and got married. And we've been ministering in the Bay Area for about 30 years now. And then I've authored these two books, God's Whispering to You and the Say Shut Up book, which is, I know, part of what you guys want to hear about today.
Yes. I just finished your Say Shut Up, Silence the Negative Thoughts in Your Head. And I loved it. And I definitely want to dive into that. But I have 4 children. And at one point, I did have 3 teenagers in the house. So I know the joys and challenges that come with that.
Right.
And so I did survive, and so did they. So praise God, praise God for that. But it's, those are tough years. You're not a kid, you're not an adult. You've got the hormones going, you've got the challenges. And so that's what I really want to talk about with our audience today, Christy, because we live in really interesting times. Your book, Say Shut Up, was written in 2016. And since then, we've had the COVID situation, which adds another level of stress. So I want to definitely add that to our conversation today. But I'm just curious, how did you kind of get into this ministry with teenagers? How did the book come about? If you could share a little bit about that, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I never planned on being in any kind of a ministry to young adults or teens. I actually never plan on being in ministry, period. I spent most of my life in Washington, D.C. I had the incredible privilege of working for Senators Bob and Elizabeth Dole. So they are just these deep Christian people that everybody respects on every side these days. So I consider it a joy to be part of their family. And I always tell them I learned so much from you about how to speak, how to write books, how to do TV and so forth, because God weaves all these things together. Yeah. So when I met my husband in California, we got ordained in the Presbyterian Church USA, but by now we've ministered in lots of different churches. We consider ourselves theological nuts because we've been in non-denominational and Episcopal and Methodist and Presbyterian. And he had a very serious accident and got hit by a car and fractured his neck in 2 places, had brain trauma. This was 11 years ago, and ended up at Stanford emergency room. Wonderful God story, miraculous. He's come out of that, not paralyzed, not brain damaged, but he does have migraines every single day. And so in the middle of all that, God called me to write this God's Whispering book. I think I have like a copy of that. Happy light, yellow book. And that's really what I was doing, Michele. My passion is how to teach people how to hear God's voice, how to pray for healing, how to be a normal person and learn how to hear God in the way that makes sense to you. And I was doing that, thinking that'd be my ministry for life. And then a very dear friend of ours, son, died by suicide by jumping in front of a train here in the Bay Area, which is unfortunately, sadly, epidemic here. Hard to imagine, but it happens a lot. And at that point, my daughter had a dream, and it's in the book that very night. And I, the next day, just felt like God gave me this vision of this book with Shut Up written on it. And I just sensed the Lord saying to me, Christy, I want you to write a book for teens, young people, to know in their minds when they hear a voice and they get a message, is that God's voice? Is that their own pain and how to understand mental health and addiction and all of that? And when are they the dark negative voices and how to shut those up? So that began a journey. Gosh, 2016, we wrote the book. And I, of course, knew that I'm a mom. How am I going to write this book? God, I was Jonah and Nineveh. And the Lord just said, you're going to write it. And about 1,000 teenagers helped me write the book. And that's how we got started.
That's awesome. Christy, I can relate to what you said about you didn't plan to do that. We have our plans, and then God has his plans for us. And
Right.
when we're open to it, we can go on these exciting adventures. I never in my wildest dreams thought I would be writing a book about recovery. And in my mind, recovery is recovering from substance abuse or depression or anxiety or mental illness. And so I have interviewed people who have just overcome a variety of change, but it's all with God's help.
That's right.
So, and I love the fact that you had so many teens input and you had some share, and some of them, I mean, all of them really touched my heart. Some kind of stood out a little bit more to me than others, just from my own personal walk. You had somebody say that when this particular teenager got a B+, the parents were so upset that they threatened to give their child's dog away. And I mean, that's just
right.
Anything that involves dogs just really wrenches my heart. And I just thought, wow, the overwhelming pressure that kids are under today.
Yeah.
And I've kind of, I'm a little bit far removed. My youngest is 23, I'm a little bit far removed from that. But I remember those days with the high highs and the low lows.
Right. Yeah, thankfully I have these 3 amazing teens that I consider some of my best friends. And one of the things I love about them is they will flat tell you, this is bad. Don't say this, Mom, whatever you do, don't get up in front of teenagers and say this. And I had them actually read the Shut Up book, of course, before we published it. And I, gave it to them. I remember we were on a vacation in Santa Barbara. I said, read it and be honest. And I really, you guys are the pulse, let me know. And it was so funny. They all read it, and Corey said some encouraging things. And I remember Annie held it up and she said it on and said, Mom, no kid's going to read this book. That's awesome.
Brutal honesty there.
Tell me why, Annie. And she was dead right. She's like, Mom, you can't start a book like this with a bunch of statistics. If you want any kid to trust you, you need to have the first chapter throwing all the parents, throw yourself under the bus. You need to help the kids understand. Help the parents understand and the kids understand, everybody, the pressure that we're under right now.
Yeah.
And the kids need to know that you see them and you get that. So that was the first chapter. And sadly, there were a lot of stories I already knew with the amount of pressure that parents are putting on kids. And I get it. We all want our kids to be able to, survive in this world. And so we try out the soccer and the ballet, and you got to make good grades, and college is so competitive and all that stuff. But it is an extraordinary amount of pressure on these kids. And that's what we saw. And of course, this book was written pre-pandemic, but teen suicide, even then, before the pandemic, was the second leading cause of death. The CDC said between kids 10 to 24. And so, that's how we got started. And I was really glad Annie was brutally honest. And a lot of the teenagers were, because this is their book. I feel like it's God's book. It's their book. And I just got to write it.
Well, I'm glad that you got that feedback, even though it maybe wasn't what you wanted to hear.
It was perfect. No, actually, it was great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you have kind of 2 introductions, one for parents and one for teens. And the book is definitely geared for teens, but I really feel like if you're a parent of teenagers and you're watching this, I think you should get the book, because it really helps you to see the challenges that teens face. And not only that, what I love about the book, Christy, is that you didn't just say, okay, here's this big problem. It's terrible. Teens are committing suicide, but you said, okay, now here are some steps to take that we can do about it. And so we will get to that in a moment. But if you could just kind of nutshell, if possible, the challenges that teens are facing today.
Right. Well, that of course brings in the pandemic and what happened, because this book will give you a good insight as to what the challenges they were facing pre-pandemic, which, as I said, were already mental health crises. In fact, quick story. I remember Annie and I were invited to go speak at Georgetown to the Georgetown Medical Society, which was all full of doctors. And the night before we went, Annie's got the terrible news that one of her friends had jumped in front of a train to die by suicide. Annie was one of the speakers with me. And my cousin Emily, who's a surgeon out there, said, Annie doesn't have to come. Oh my goodness, don't, she doesn't. And Annie said, no, Mom, this is what I'm called to do. I'm going. So we got out there and we began, I spoke and showed my video and talked about the book and, the resources, et cetera. And, the lovely group of doctors that were very, reserved. And then Annie took the microphone. I didn't know what she was going to say. And she said, hi, my name's Annie and I'm 17. And I'm wondering how many of you doctors knew of someone when you were 17 who died by suicide. And one person in this huge room raised their hand and she said, well, as I said, I'm 17 and by now I know 7. And the last one was my friend who jumped in front of a train. She's
Wow.
like, this is why it's different to be us than to be you when you were growing up. And all of them were just, and she said, here's all the multifaceted reasons why. And, by the end of the evening, you had doctors raising their hand, Annie, pick me. And it was so, at the end, they were all in line to talk to her. She was signing my book. It was fantastic. But it's horrible what teens, the pressure, the social media, everywhere I go, people say, why is this so bad, Christy? Pre-pandemic, mind you.
Right.
Lots of reasons, social media, pressure on these kids, sleep deprivation. There's all these reasons. But then fast forward to the pandemic.
Right.
And I can't even find the words, honestly, Michele, to describe how bad it is right now. I think we are just beginning to have the tip of the iceberg of the mental health pandemic, I would call it, the shadow pandemic that has hit these kids. Self-harm is up 300%. Many states have declared a state of emergencies because their emergency rooms are full of teens and adolescents who are self-harming. I don't think I think it's pretty much factual, though the research deep in the research hasn't flat said this, that pretty much every teenager or young adult is suffering from some level of anxiety or depression related to the pandemic. It was shocking to hear that 25% of young adults seriously contemplated suicide in the pandemic. I mean, my girls are at Berkeley and I regularly get calls. There's another one at a sorority that just killed herself. And a lot of little kids won't leave the house because understandably the social anxiety, the world doesn't feel like a safe place. And of course there's OCD and washing hands all the time. And then as you and I talked about, the addictions are just, everybody's self-medicating. And my daughter Corey regularly takes kids to the ER at Berkeley to check them in because there's another drug situation or and then lastly, tragically, the mental health professionals will tell you, the ones who are honest, that what they're able to offer right now can only touch the tip of this giant iceberg. Wow. It's near impossible, even if you're me and know people, to get someone into a child psychiatrist. We just send people to ERs. And so, to try to get a good therapist or a good psychiatrist is, even though we're big fans of that and we refer out, it's difficult. So that's the world we're looking at right now. It is a huge, giant mission field of young people who are hurting and feel very alone with no one to help.
That's so disturbing, Christy. And, the focus for the past we're coming up on 2 years in March of 2022 has been keeping people, quote, safe from COVID. And I really don't want to get into the weeds on that, but we have neglected how it has affected people on an emotional and mental level. And
Mhm.
let's face it, adults are struggling too.
Yeah.
But what do you think it is about teenagers that it affects them differently? Do you think it's just because they don't have that life experience to realize that this too shall pass and we'll get through it? Or is there something else going on?
It's a really good question, and I think that's part of it. But I think the biggest issue is the social isolation.
Mm,
Um,
right,
Before the pandemic, we did research, and we asked 500 kids, if you're in trouble, who are you going to tell? And we gave them choices. A was a parent, B was a teacher, C was a therapist, and the last one was a friend.
right,
70% checked a friend or no one. So that was a big eye opener to us as to who are these kids going to tell if they're hurting.
right,
And with the COVID lockdowns, and again, depending on everybody's view, yes, we should do more or less. But the truth is, and the CDC will say this, they're in NIMH, kids are 10 times more likely to die of suicide than COVID.
hmm,
But they're isolated, to answer your question.
right,
The lockdowns have taken away years of their lives. So in the case of my daughter, for example, when she was a senior in high school, when 2020 hit, she had no prom, she had no special senior event, she had no graduation, she had no friends, and she's an extrovert.
mhm,
So to keep kids locked up away from their friends
yeah,
and sports, and if you track down the suicides, sadly, of which there are many of those parents will tell you they think that was the biggest factor, is that their kid could not do their normal life. And
right,
so again, that's not everything, right? Because it was already the second leading cause of death before the pandemic. But I think
right,
the pandemic was like pouring gasoline on an already raging fire. And so
absolutely.
that's a big factor. Yeah. And you're right. They don't, in general, you're right that when you talk to a kid that's suicidal, and I talk to many, I mean, the overwhelming majority, 98% or whatever, they don't want to die. They
Mhm,
just are in so much pain and they don't know how to make the pain stop. And so that is this too shall pass. They don't realize their pain is temporary and that it can
right.
get better. So, yeah, that's all a perfect storm, all that together.
That makes so much sense with the social aspect of
Hmm.
teens and with young people.
Yeah.
So I jotted a few notes when I was reading your book, and I wrote down the top 5 challenges that kids face, the areas that stress them out. And of course, this was written pre-pandemic. But number 1 was academics, 2 sports, 3 peer pressure, 4 bullying, and 5 feeling alone in my pain.
Hmm.
So then when you add the layer of the pandemic on it, kids who were maybe trying to get a scholarship or go to college to play sports, and then their season is canceled.
Right.
They're trying to do online learning, and they're, maybe struggling with that a little bit. So their academics are hurting, and then again, maybe trying to get into college or something like that. I
Right.
gave a couple of examples in the book of kids who were committing suicide over their homework not being done because the
Hmm.
enormous amount of pressure put on by their parents, and their parents are well-meaning. They want their children to be successful, of course, but it is really eye-opening. And that's why I say, I feel like you hear the voice of teens, you relate to them, you have input from teens who are walking it out right now, but it's also helpful for parents to realize, wow, this is serious.
Hmm.
This is, I need to be careful not to put so much pressure on my child, to be
Right.
more understanding of where he is or where she is
Hmm.
in the scope of things.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we actually are in the middle of writing a several new books, but one of them is for parents and
Okay.
for youth pastors, adults, how to help your hurting teen.
Mm,
And we started that before the pandemic and did a lot of speaking on it. And we have had a lot of parents helping with that. And I often have people ask, like, parents, and in those conferences, what can we know? What can we do? And one of the stories I tell that kind of sums up some of it is lots of times I'll have parents come up to me and say, I'm just wondering, is it really this bad? Like, was it just as
mhm.
bad when we were growing up? It's just we didn't have social media and
Right.
so forth, and people didn't know about it. And, you know, I try to answer by just saying, you know, here's what I can tell you. When I speak to a group of teens, whether it's 10 or 100 or 1,000, I always ask the question, how many of you know of someone who's died by suicide? You know, either recently, or 90% will raise their hands. And so then I say to that parent, like Annie did to the Georgetown doctors,
Right.
like, I don't know what it was like when you were growing up, but like, I didn't know anybody who died by suicide.
Sure.
You know, most of the people who died were old, you know, so you have to remember, this is the world your kids are growing up. I mean,
Right.
even pre-pandemic, but now. So having love and compassion is huge. You
Right.
know, it's that scripture that says love covers a multitude of sins.
Mhm.
And I know for parents, and I get this, I can be like this, when you see your kids struggling, sometimes your voice may come across as really angry, but you're really just scared because you're like, you don't want them to do this or that.
Right.
But kids need a lot of tender, compassionate, gentle love right now. And that may be different than what you as a parent grew up with, and your parents might have been a lot more strict or
Right.
whatever. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be boundaries and whatever, but they need a lot of understanding and a lot of love. And as Annie has taught me a lot, and Corey, they say, Mom, whatever you do, don't get up in front of kids and say, I remember what it was like to be your age. They're like, no parent knows. So that's a helpful thing to say to the parent, can say to the kid, even if there's a lot of problems. You know, sometimes people come to me and say, I'm hopeless that my kid and I are ever going to have a good relationship again.
Wow.
Like, we're at each other's throat. You know, I say it really goes a long way, no matter how bad things are, to, as we say, rebuild broken bridges. And that is possible. And one of the ways you rebuild a broken bridge is to, as my husband Ben says, fall on your sword. And you can go to your kid and say, look, I've made a lot of mistakes. I do not pretend to be a perfect parent. I'm very sorry for where I've ever hurt you. My intention has been to try to take care of you. I'm sure I've made mistakes. But one thing I want you to know, I'm realizing more and more, there's no way I can understand what it's like to be somebody your age. Right. That goes a long way for kids. My husband, Ben, says, how many marriages and parent-kid relationships would be saved if people just learned to say, I'm sorry, you know?
There you go.
And that kids can be very forgiving if you really fall on your sword and offer compassion. And that's what they need right now, I think. Annie's right. We can't possibly understand, but we can offer a lot of mercy and compassion.
That's so good. As you were saying that, Christy, I heard somebody speak a couple of years ago, and he was trying to get us to understand the impact of social media. And he said, remember when you were in middle school and, you know, maybe a kid tripped and, you know, slid in the cafeteria and fell and, you know, got Jello or whatever we were served back then, you know, and it was funny, and a few kids laughed and the kid cleaned himself off and it was over. Now somebody puts it on the phone,
right,
puts it out, it's all over social media, and then the kid becomes a meme, and it you know, it just blows up. And you know, I mean, I think of things I did as a teenager. You know, I mean, the joke is, I'm glad there wasn't Facebook when I was a teen, because there's no recording of that.
Yes,
you know? But it's really kind of sobering when you think about it.
It is.
And how quickly things go viral, and people's lives can be ruined by something that maybe is just a joke or whatever. But yeah, it's just kind of mind-boggling how it all gets so
the social media thing is very tough, because there's been a lot of research, no doubt, that it contributes to depression, and especially with girls. You know, you look at your Instagram and your friend's Instagram so much better, and you didn't get invited to this party and they're all having fun, and you've got all that, and the cyberbullying, we've seen a lot of that, no doubt. And of course, all the toxic stuff that comes at them, you know, so parents are understandably really worried about that. At the same time, I'm pretty sure that I'm getting this stat right. The American Pediatric Association actually came out in the pandemic and said, it's a really bad idea to take your phone from your kid, because it's the one way they're staying connected to their friends. So, it's a tough one. My son Benji, who's been through a lot, was very wise to decide, I don't want an Instagram. I don't want, because he didn't want to put himself in a situation. And so I guess I would just say to parents, try to keep an open dialogue with your kid.
Right.
Even though it's right, we know that there's a lot of negative stuff, and the TikTok, of course, is where they are. TikTok is their thing.
Yes.
There's a lot of negative, but if we kind of come at them like it's all from the devil and it's all horrible kind of thing, then that's not going to build a bridge. But at the same time, we need to be informed about what they're seeing, and also just educate them. I know you've got to, that this is your world and everybody's doing it and on it, and I'm trying to be supportive, but I also know a lot of the dangers. Here's what I've heard's happened, and just to try to talk with them about it honestly, and be an advocate. It's tough.
Yeah, communication is so important, and
Yeah.
we're busy, right?
Right.
And,
Right.
we've got to make time for that and be intentional. Well, I think we've built a pretty concerning picture of where teens are, and let's shift gears a little bit so we can give parents and teens some resources and things to think about.
Right.
Another one of the things I loved about your book, Christy, is that you offer those resources, kind of like what to do, who to go to, give kids things to think about. So it's very proactive, and I love that, because again, I don't want to just paint a negative picture and go, well, this is really unfortunate. You and I both know that God is a healer. He is a friend. He is a comforter. And so, as you were mentioning, hospitals are full, ERs are full with not only maybe people who are sick, but people who are cutting and maybe attempting suicide and depressed and things like that. To me, that is an opportunity to trust God, because there's no waiting line to get to God.
Yeah.
He is available. He understands the situation completely. So let's talk a little bit about some of the action steps that teens can do if they are struggling with anxiety, depression, maybe suicidal thoughts. What would you say to that end?
To the teenagers, to the teens or young adults? Well, I mean, first thing I would say to you is that you're not alone. If you think that you're struggling, please know that every other teenager or college student is struggling with something right now, no matter what their Instagram seems to say. Everyone is having some level of anxiety or depression or social, so you are not alone. Secondly, it isn't going to go on forever. It is a really hard time. But third, don't stay alone in your pain. That's the worst thing you can do. And so I would encourage you to find somebody really safe you trust. Maybe that's a friend, maybe that's a parent, I hope, someone that you trust you can open up to. And then I would offer you our book. We actually, if you go to our website, sayshutup.com, we have a free book for you. You can download the book, and if you want to order it, it's on Amazon and Kindle, and there's a link, and I think Kindle's $2 and Amazon's not much. But, we'd love you to read the book. Tell us what you think as a teen, because I really like Annie's in my life, that will be honest.
Yes.
But on the website and in the book, there's a chapter that says, find safe people who will shut up and listen to you. And it gives you, I think, 10 different options of things you can do if you're struggling right now, people you can consider reaching out to. And I find that my teen friends really appreciate that they're not necessarily being drugged by a teacher or a parent somewhere, but they get to kind of look at the menu of the different things and choose. But reach out for help. On our sayshutup.com, there is a link that you can go to that says how to help your hurting friends or find help. And that gives you a lot of resources and immediate resources. Like if you're feeling suicidal, if you don't know how to turn to, you can go right to crises text line and text someone, and immediately you'll be connected for free with a crises counselor who can help you. Talkspace is really good at getting, you can do an online therapist or psychiatrist. And then there's lots of spiritual resources, because we know the best thing I can tell you is to cry out to Jesus. He sees you, he knows you, He knows all you're struggling with, and you're not alone, mostly because Jesus is with you. So that's what I would tell a teenager right now.
Absolutely. That's so good. And one of the things that you mentioned in your book that I highlighted is the most important message that you could give, Christy, is that God loves you and you can hear his voice for yourself. And the title of the book, Shut Up, Silence the Negative Thoughts in Your Head, is really speaking to that. You know, the enemy, the one who doesn't love you, you know, speaks to us and tells us nobody loves us, we're failure, and all of these, and even maybe says it's best for you to end your life. It's best for you to jump in front of that train. You know, I recently interviewed somebody who did hear that voice.
Yeah.
Told her to drive her car into the lake, and it would be best for her to do that. So I think addressing that spiritual battle,
yes,
and understanding that Jesus paid the price.
That's right.
He loves us so much, and he is really that friend who never leaves us. I mean, even as adults, but especially young people, they all want to be popular and to be liked and to have friends. It's so important. But Jesus is that friend who is closer than a brother and just loves us so very much. So I love that you put that in there, because really, he's the one who made us, and he knows, you know, we can talk to a counselor, and you know, the counselor can maybe kind of get a little bit of a perspective. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that, but at the end of the day, we can kind of make it seem different than maybe what it really is. You know,
I'm so glad you pointed that out, Michele, because really the most important chapter in the book is, how do you hear God's voice?
Absolutely.
You know, for whether it's an adult listening right now or a teen, that God loves you more than you could possibly imagine. And God's always trying to whisper to you. My other book, God's Whispering to You, teaches you more in depth. We do lots of events. Is That You, God, or Spicy Pizza? That was named by a Hawaiian teenager when we were speaking in Hawaii, that like, how do I learn to hear God? And how do I, so that book teaches you that, but you do need to understand that God loves you more than you can possibly imagine. You need to learn to understand, to hear the Holy Spirit, because that gives you the power to silence the negative voices. And that's a game changer. If a teen or a young adult or any of us start hearing from God, that really dramatically helps our mental health, all of our health, right? I mean, it really does.
So true.
And I just wanted to say one thing I forgot to say, Michele, or I want to add an exclamation point. We are at a very exciting point in the ministry. So any teen that wants to join us, we would be thrilled. Thanks to Tara Rumler, your daughter, who is a superstar. God led her to me, and she's got her finger on the pulse with social media and knows kids. We're rebranding the ministry, and they're calling it the 1024 movement, which I thought was kind of cute. I thought it was a Bible verse, and you know, they're like, no, Christy, don't you understand 1024? Because teen suicide's the second leading cause of death from people 10 to 24. And those are our people. We want to student-led, want to reach our people and move them away from suicide and depression and move them toward healing and hope in God. And Tara's helping us do that. So if you're interested as a teen in joining the movement and helping us in any way, you can email me, Christy@sayshutup.com. And we'd love to get your help and your involvement in what we're doing.
That's awesome. And just giving kids a voice and a purpose is so huge. And I'll definitely be posting your email, your links, how people can get the book and all of that good stuff, because I really want people to reach out to you. And shameless plug, yes, I'm very proud of my daughter, and she was the one who connected us. And I'm very happy that she's involved in this movement, because she's very gifted and has always had a passion for young people, has been involved in youth ministry for years. So
she's
thank you for that. Thank you. I think so.
Yes, she is. And as is her mom, I just am so glad to get to have time with you too today, Michele.
It's very special, Christy, for sure. But one of the things that you mentioned earlier, and it just reminded me of a couple of different excerpts from the book, is you had a couple of people who were either had attempted suicide or were thinking about it and began to hear God's voice.
Uh-huh.
I love you. I have a purpose for you. And that is really what can shift everything very, very quickly when you can tune into the voice of God, shut up the voice of the enemy and the negative voices in your mind,
Right.
and tune into God. Everything just gets so much better because God just loves us so much. So I really like those testimonies of the people that you put in the book. That was incredible.
Oh, well, I'm glad. Yeah. And everybody hears God differently, right? And
Right.
that's the God whispering book. Like my son's like, I've never heard God before in my life, as far as Annie has dreams and Corey has prophetic visions. But he every day gets in the car and reads Jesus Calling and is able to sum up, this is exactly what it means. And so God does speak to him in a different way. So it's
Right.
helping equip them to go, that's the point of the book. God is whispering to you all the time, but how do you kind of shut out the noise and learn how to turn up the volume and hear God in your own life? And you're absolutely right. That's what changes all of us, really. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's so good. Well, Christy, as we wrap up today, what would you say to parents who are raising teens, young people? You know, sometimes it's hard to pour into somebody when we're empty ourselves,
Right.
because with everything going on in the world, I think everyone is really, really struggling. But
Yeah.
what encouragement can you give to parents today?
Right. So, one thing parents, I think, are afraid of sometimes, and I'll have people come to me and say, I don't know whether to get this book for my kid because I'm not sure my kid knows all this is going on, and I might be putting thoughts in their head. And what I can tell you is that is 100% not true. Your kid, no matter how old, they know what's going on. And it's very scary to them because often a friend's told them that they're in trouble and they don't know what to do.
Right.
Which is why we're actually starting on campuses, at college campuses and high schools, and training up kids to know how to recognize and get their friends help. So I would just say not to be afraid to ask them, again, Annie's thing, don't pretend you know everything, but that's, be like, hey, I was watching this, show that Michele did, and I had no idea how bad things are. This is what this speaker, this author is saying. Are you hearing things in the pandemic that people your age are struggling? And of course they're going to say yes. I would be surprised if they didn't. And then that builds a bridge to go, well, look, again, I'm not an expert, but I am here for you. I love you. I want you to know that there's no judgment ever. If you have a problem, I want to be there for you. And, here's a book. Here's a book and here's the website. And this author realizes she's just a mom, 50-year-old mom of kids, and she doesn't know everything. So she'd love to hear from you. I find that a lot of kids are, if they're invited to sort of give their opinion, that they will check it out. Maybe they're not readers. I'm amazed at the amount of kids who tell me, Christy, I read your book and decided not to kill myself. I'm stunned at that because I say to them, I don't read books. I'm amazed at a kid, but a lot of them don't read. And so, that's the social media. But that's what I would say. Lots of love, lots of open conversations. Don't be scared because perfect love casts out fear, right? We've got Jesus with us. But ask. And if you are worried about your kid, reach out and get help,
That's so good. That's so good. Yeah, I love that. Well, I think that that's a beautiful note to end on. How honoring it would be to hear somebody say, I read your book and it helped me and I didn't end my life. I mean, I know it takes a lot of sacrifice to write a book. And that is just such beautiful affirmation that even though God surprised you and this wasn't the path that you necessarily had planned for your life, this is what he wants you to be doing.
Well, thanks for that, Michele. It is truly an honor. And I've loved being with you. Thanks for letting me share some about what's going on about the book. And so grateful for your platform and what you're doing. It matters. It's super important.
Well, thank you, Christy. And I'll definitely, again, be posting that information so that people can reach out to you and get those resources. So thank you for being our guest today, Christy. God bless you and your ministry and your family. And I want to thank our audience for watching this episode of Voices of Recovery. We're creating a safe place where people can go on their journey with God. If you're new here, please give us a like or follow. And I encourage you to share this message out because there are a lot of people on your page who need to hear what Christy had to say today. Let's shut up the negative voices, tune into what God is saying. He loves us so much, and we really have our hope in him. So God bless you, Christy. God bless our audience. We'll see you next time on Voices of Recovery. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.